It's December 2nd here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with the ongoing Ukraine crisis and North Korean troop deployment to Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy once again stressed that North Korean troops are being killed in Russia, while new EU leaders visited Kyiv as a show of support on their first day in office. Syria is seeing a return to civil war after a new rebel coalition staged a surprise attack in the country's second-largest city, Aleppo, over the weekend, in an attempt to take more government-controlled territory. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has tapped in-laws to serve in his new administration, with daughter Tiffany's father-in-law, Mossad Boulos, picked as senior advisor on Arab and Middle Eastern affairs, while the father of eldest daughter Ivanka's husband, Jared Kushner, is Trump's choice for ambassador to France. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy once again said North Korean soldiers deployed in western Russia have been killed and wounded, while continuing to call for NATO membership to new EU officials. Our Isingja reports.
In an exclusive interview with Japan's Kyodo News, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said Sunday that a number of North Korean troops deployed to Russia's Kursk region had been killed in action. Zelenskyy did not say how many soldiers had been killed or wounded so far, but said that it's almost certain that the troops were to be used as cannon fodder. The Ukrainian president also stressed that support for his country from its partners is not enough, and again stressed the need for NATO membership, saying the war has entered a complicated period, with Russia advancing faster in the eastern part of Ukraine. Also on Sunday, 3 senior EU officials made a surprise visit to Kyiv to hold talks with Zelenskyy on how to bolster support from the bloc. EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy Kaja Kallas, European Council President Antonio Costa, and Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos were all in Kyiv for the meeting. After the talks, Costa announced that the EU will continue to provide Ukraine with financial assistance, including a monthly payment of 1.5 billion euros for a full year. The money would come from the proceeds of Russia's frozen assets and can be used for military purposes. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has upped his push to win the war, approving a record-high military budget for the 2025 fiscal year. According to the Russian government's website on Sunday, around 32.5% of the budget drawn up for 2025 has been allocated for national defense, amounting to around $145 billion. With the foreign ministers of the 32 NATO countries holding their last meeting of the year later this week, a meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council consultative body is also scheduled. There, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha is likely to push for Ukraine's membership of the military alliance. President Zelenskyy, during an interview with British broadcaster Sky News, said membership will allow him to negotiate a ceasefire deal with Russia. 이승재, Arirang News.
When things were supposed to settle down after the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire deal, rebel forces in Syria launched a surprise offensive and have now seized control of most of the city of Aleppo. Our Kim Bo-kyung has more.
Just as a ceasefire began between Hezbollah and Israel, another conflict flared up in the Middle East, this time in Syria. On Sunday, Syrian military rushed reinforcements to the northwest of the country, and both Syrian and Russian aircraft carried out a series of strikes on insurgents who have seized the country's second-largest city of Aleppo. More than 370 people, including dozens of civilians, have so far been killed, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Rebel groups are now pushing south toward the neighboring city of Hama, coming on the 5th day of the surprise offensive. The rebels, led by the Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and allied factions, began the assault last Wednesday, leading Syrian forces to announce a temporary troop withdrawal on Saturday, citing the need to regroup for a counter-offensive. The fighting marks a major escalation in Syria's years-long civil war, which began with popular uprisings across the country in 2011. The conflict had mostly remained stagnated since 2020, with the rebel groups having been largely contained to a small portion of Idlib province. That is why one expert called this one of the biggest challenges President Bashar al-Assad now faces.
It's one of the biggest challenges that Bashar al-Assad has ever had to face during his time as Syrian leader since 2000 and since the civil war began in 2011. It's very similar to the situation that he found himself in when the civil war first began.
Russia and Iran, Assad's primary allies, both vowed support, with the Kremlin having condemned the rebel offensive and have called for the swift restoration of constitutional order in the region. Iran dispatched its top diplomat Abbas Araghchi, who met with the Syrian president in Damascus on Sunday, saying Tehran would firmly support him in confronting terrorist attacks. However, with Russia's attention divided by the ongoing war against Ukraine and recent Israeli airstrikes having weakened Hezbollah as a fighting force, thereby diminishing Iran's capacity to assist Syria, experts say such a loss of critical support complicates Assad's position. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Russia-North Korea ties appear to be getting tighter, with a visit to Russia by the North's leader Kim Jong-un looking possible as early as May. What does this mean for our relations and for the Ukraine crisis? We're joined by Dr. Bruce Bennett. Thanks much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
So Russia has reportedly invited North Korean forces to its event to mark the 80th anniversary of the Soviet victory in World War II next year in May. Why such an invitation?
Well, Russia's trying to establish itself as a global superpower, having much broader control over the world like it used to during the Soviet era. When it invites North Korea, it's trying to appear to have yet one more ally towards that objective. That, of course, is not going to go over well with China, which also wants to be the global superpower. Both Russia and China want to displace the U.S. from its position, but they don't want necessarily the other to have that control.
Well, then, is a visit to Moscow by the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to, lead the North Korean military for the event likely?
I think it's entirely possible. We don't really know. It depends. Kim is facing a fair amount of internal instability. You can see that in his decision to renounce unification at the end of last year, in his decision to send North Korean troops to Russia, both of which are very risky actions seeking to gain some greater control internally. He's taking some chances. Will he take the chance of leaving the country and leaving it in control of his sister or someone else? That's a really good question right now, which is hard to tell.
Dr. Bennett, we are just a month away from the time when Donald Trump returns to the Oval Office, and he's been very keen to end the Ukraine crisis. Now, the question is, what kind of course of action will Trump take regarding the crisis in Ukraine?
Oh, I think President-elect Trump will want to get together with Putin. He'll want to get together with Zelenskyy. He'll want to try to put a proposal on the table that his people are probably crafting now and probably reviewing with Russian and Ukrainian representatives now. I think he's going to want to move very quickly. We've noticed recently that Ukraine is prepared to talk about some details of a compromise situation. The question will be, is Putin ready to do that? And so I think he's already pressing ahead. He's not just sitting back and waiting for his time as president. And I think he plans to hit the ground running with something on the table and ready to go and talk with these two leaders to make final details complete.
Well, it looks like Trump will be just as active, or rather, aggressive as when it comes to handling North Korean issues. Now, apparently, the Trump administration is considering arranging direct talks with the North's leader, Kim Jong-un. What do you think Seoul should do then? Should we just, watch for now? Or should Seoul take separate actions?
Well, I think the first action Seoul needs to take is to be working with President Trump, President-elect Trump, the way that the Zelenskyy and Putin are apparently working with him. This is a time to coordinate positions. He is going to be the president of the United States, and while it's a little unusual to have that kind of foreign contact beforehand, I think it's important. But Trump clearly thinks he's got leverage on Kim Jong-un. The question is, does he really? Because Kim was seriously offended by Trump walking out of the Hanoi summit in 2019.
Right.
A lot of his advisors who had helped set up that summit paid very serious prices because of the failure of that summit. So I think this is not a foregone conclusion that he's going to meet with Kim Jong-un. I think that President Yoon and his personnel ought to be trying to coordinate, because this may be a much longer term negotiation than President Trump probably wants to have.
Right. Still some, hard feelings lingering from the North Korean leader. Now, Dr. Bennett, before I let you go, Ukraine has long been asking South Korea to provide weapons. Now, do you think Seoul will wait until Trump 2.0 begins then? Is offering Ukraine weapons on hold for now?
Well, look, President Trump has been very clear that he views countries as being part of a coalition. He wants them to work together for global security and not just for bilateral security. South Korean public opinion is such that sending weapons to Ukraine isn't very popular from what I'm looking at in the polls. I think Trump will be wanting Yoon to try and build some support for that kind of position and to start talking with his people about that possibility. This is a coalition of free countries that Trump is going to want to see strengthened. And he's going to want Yoon as part of that cooperative effort in South Korea. So I think this is time for South Korea to start realizing that it's very hard under a Trump administration to only have Korean security. You've got to be looking at global security.
Alrighty, Dr. Bennett, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
South Korean Consul General to Shanghai, Kim Yong-jun expressed hopes for improvement in the Seoul-Beijing bilateral ties, as President Xi Jinping is widely expected to visit South Korea for the APEC summit slated next year in Gyeongju. During a meeting with Korean journalists visiting the Consul General in Shanghai last Thursday, Kim said it's time for bilateral ties to once again develop, citing Beijing's recent visa exemption policy for Koreans and soon-to-be-held patent office chiefs meeting between Korea, China, and Japan. His comments also hinted at the possibility of resolving the difficulties Korean companies are facing in China if President Xi's visit to Korea is made. A near week-long meeting in Busan to pen a UN treaty to curb plastic pollution ended early Monday morning without reaching a minimum declaratory agreement, as the differences between countries failed to be resolved. The fifth UN Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee meeting in the southeastern port city was set to be the final session for countries to agree to a legally binding global treaty on limiting production and phasing out harmful chemicals. And with no agreement in place, the committee said it will take time to resolve the issue, adding that negotiations will resume at a later date. It's reported that the final agreement fell through as oil-producing countries, including Saudi Arabia, did not accept provisions on plastic production regulation. A musical producer here has been making remarkable strides on stages both at home and overseas, with ambitions to prove that language is no barrier in musicals. Our culture correspondent Song Jun spoke with Broadway's first Asian soul lead producer.
Just like the lyrics, Shin Chun-soo's career is roaring on. A trailblazer in Korean theater, he's the president and main producer of OD Company, one of the country's leading musical production companies. This year, he made history as the first Asian to serve as the sole lead producer of a Broadway musical. The Great Gatsby, a stage adaptation of F. Scott Fitzgerald's classic novel, has been running at the Broadway theater since April, grossing over $1 million every week since its opening, and even winning a Tony Award for Best Costume Design. And the momentum doesn't stop there. Next year, the production will make its West End debut. So, what's the secret to crafting a musical that's set to perform at the world's two greatest theater capitals?
The Great Gatsby is a timeless masterpiece with themes like the pursuit of love and struggles across social classes that feel so relevant today. We wanted the production to feel like one grand party, combining dazzling stage aesthetics with a powerful sense of tragedy.
But Gatsby is just one chapter in Shin's career. Back at home, the beloved Korean production of Jekyll and Hyde is gearing up for its 9th season.
Jekyll and Hyde helped me establish myself as a producer. At the time, it was seen as revolutionary, bringing together fresh talent from actors and staff to producers. For this 20th anniversary production, we focused on every detail, crafting it as a gift, not just for the audience, but for ourselves as well.
With a repertoire that includes hits like Grease, Sweeney Todd, Man of La Mancha, and Il Tenore, how does he decide which stories to bring to life?
Classic literature has universal emotions that connect with everyone, and classic musicals have songs that leave a lasting impression. Sometimes I take risks with experimental works that push boundaries, but at the heart of it all is my commitment to creating high-quality productions for the audience.
Shin also shared his vision for bringing Korean musicals to a broader audience.
I remember being a British producer in 2001 who was surprised to hear Korean even had musicals. Now, with the growing cultural and economic influence, Korean musicals are gaining global attention. To keep growing, we must see the world as our stage and support young talent to create works with universal appeal.
And he'll keep working hard to make this happen.
My next goal is to stage a production with Korean actors performed in Korean. I believe musicals can transcend language, and this will showcase the talent of our actors and the excellence of Korean musicals.
It's a decades-long passion that's driving Korean musicals to new heights on the world stage. 송유진, Arirang News.
Now, let's take a look at the stories from around the world with our Kim Xiang. Good morning, Xiang.
Good morning, Dami.
So let's start with the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's new nominations for his administration, and it looks like he's really keeping it in the family.
Yeah, that's right, Dami. Trump announced several new picks over the weekend, including 2 of his in-laws for diplomatic positions and a new FBI director. Now, Trump announced Sunday that Massad Boulos, his daughter Tiffany's father-in-law, would serve as a senior advisor on Arab and Middle Eastern affairs, while Charles Kushner, father of Ivanka Trump's husband, Jared, was tapped as U.S. ambassador to France the day before. Opting not to mention that Boulos, a billionaire Lebanese-American businessman, is his daughter's father-in-law, he did, however, describe him as a deal-maker and highly respected in the business world. Now, real estate developer Kushner, his pick for ambassador to France, was pardoned by Trump in 2020 after a conviction on federal charges, including tax evasion. Trump called Kushner a strong advocate for the United States. Now, Trump also announced that his former aide, Kash Patel, will lead the FBI, although the incumbent director, Christopher Wray, whose 10-year term ends in 2027, will either have to be fired or resign for Patel to take the position immediately. The U.S. president-elect also said he plans to nominate Florida Sheriff Chad Chronister to lead the Drug Enforcement Agency. Thousands of pro-EU protesters in the Georgian capital, Tbilisi, continued for a 4th night on Sunday, following Thursday's announcement that the country's government would freeze EU accession talks for 4 years. Tensions are yet to subside as some protesters gathered in Tbilisi's central Rustaveli Avenue were seen shooting fireworks toward police who retaliated with water cannons and tear gas. Georgian news agency Interpress reported that protesters also blocked a road into the country's main commercial port in the Black Sea city of Spotty. According to local media, protests were seen in at least 8 cities and towns against the ruling Georgian Dream Party. The pro-Western Georgian president Salome Zurabichvili, whose term is about to expire, called the current parliament illegitimate following allegations of fraud in last month's elections, while saying she would remain in office until new parliamentary elections are held.
So there is a deep crisis.
Moving over to the UK, a Second World War bunker near the southern English city of Portsmouth hosted the first ever fully underground British marathon on Saturday. A total of 87 runners participated in the unique run, with head torches attached to their helmets, running a total of 91 laps of a makeshift 460-meter course to complete the full 42.195 kilometers. After running almost 100 laps in the dark, narrow and damp tunnels, 48-year-old Michael Burke won the men's race with 3 hours and 42 minutes and 27 seconds record, while Laura Watts won the women's race with a time of 4 hours and 22 minutes. Another underground race will take place at the same venue next November. In India, hundreds of expectant mothers gathered for a mass baby shower organized at a local religious fair on Sunday. The fair, dedicated to the Hindu goddess Dhanama Devi, took place in the country's southern city of Haveri, where the female participants wore colorful traditional Indian saris and were given flower crowns as part of the ritual ceremony. The pregnant mothers received gifts of a variety of food items, including mangoes, tamarind and pickled cucumber, as elderly women blessed them. Now, one participant said that she felt very lucky to participate in this function.
It's a warmer start to the new week. Afternoon highs will hike to 13 degrees in the capital, going up nearly 5 degrees higher than yesterday. But there will be a sharp drop in temperatures overnight, waking up to -4 degrees in Seoul tomorrow. Now, the west of Jeollabuk-do province and central areas could see spotty rain into this afternoon. The capital area will be covered with lots of clouds for most of the day. Now, air quality is good for this morning, but dusty air will blow in from the afternoon. So we are expecting a higher level of fine dust for west of central areas, but the colder air tonight will push away those dust in the air. Checking on today's highs now, most parts will see highs going up 2 to 5 degrees higher. Daejeon, Daegu topping out at 17 degrees. Busan and Gyeongju at 18 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Now, it looks like we're going to have a promising weather for central areas, but Jeollado provinces will have some snow at the end of the week. Jeju Island will see spotty rain. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for our Monday edition of New Day at Arirang. Have a wonderful start to the week.